Hi, I'm Melissa Bane Sevier. I'm a Presbyterian minister who lives in Kentucky. I've been a Christian educator and also served as a pastor for 12 years in Indiana and almost 11 years in Kentucky. A couple of years ago, I decided to change my focus, so I took something that I'd been doing part-time, writing and photography, and I made it my new full-time career, and I'm having a real blast with it. One of the best parts of it has been working with the 2017-2018 Horizons Bible Study. I was honored to have been chosen to write that, and I'm already enjoying getting to meet many of you around the country who will be using it soon. The topic of Hebrews was chosen a few years ago by a leadership team from Presbyterian women, and when I was chosen as the author, I was asked to approach that New Testament book in creative ways that readers would find helpful and meaningful. That's what I've attempted to do. And I want to thank Sung-Hee Chang, who wrote the suggestions for leaders, and Irene Cordalis-Peterson, the artist whose work is in the study. And there will probably be some of her slides here in this DVD as well. I'm also using some of my own photography, and I am so deeply appreciative of Betsy Ensign George, the Horizons editor, Laura Lee, the art director, and this group of Presbyterian women who has gathered today from Louisville and its surrounding towns to help me in the filming of this DVD. So I hope you'll enjoy the study as much as I enjoyed writing it. So let's get started. In 2008, a group of researchers from the University of Virginia took 34 students to the base of a very steep hill, and they fitted them with weighted backpacks and then asked them to estimate the steepness of the hill, the angle of the steepness of the hill. Some participants were standing alone with their heavy backpacks on, and some were standing with a friend. And it's so interesting that those who were with a friend estimated the hill at much less steep an angle than those who were standing alone. And the steepness was changed even in their estimations by the fact of how long they had been friends with this person. So the longer they'd been friends, the less steep the hill seemed to them. I love this study because it talks to me about what community does for us. How when we're alone, we can do things, we can gut it through life, but when we're together with somebody who cares about us, it makes the hills much less steep. I was asked to write a study about Hebrews, but I was given the freedom to make it mine, however I want it to be. So I read it, and I read it again, and I read it again and again. Hebrews is a complex book. It is 13 chapters, 13 that are packed with theology and wisdom and teaching and preaching, encouragement, warning. The Horizons Bible Study is 9 fairly brief lessons. So I realized after my first reading that I needed some overarching theme to work through the book, through the study. And it literally came to me in the middle of the night because I thought a lot about how the book was written to and for a specific community, about how it has been interpreted in 2,000 years of Christendom by different communities all around the world, and how communities today interpret it differently from those ancient communities and from each other. We have several congregations represented here today, and you don't all think exactly the same way. And that's a good thing. But it's all about community. As Presbyterians, we gather and we hear the word in worship, and we interpret it together, and we reflect it back together, and then we walk out the door and we live it. Even if we live it separately, we're still kind of living it together because we've heard it together. Particularly in Hebrews, where the community considered itself, and the writer considered that community to be under great duress. this was an important concept for them, to think about drawing together with all these theological concepts, with their tradition, their hopes for the future, and to support each other. So they need to think of themselves as community, to explore what that means theologically for them. So the study is thematic and not sequential. It seemed just the best way to approach such a complex text in just 9 lessons. I came up with 2 images because not only am I a preacher who's really interested in the Word and a writer, but also I'm a visual artist, a photographer. And so the first one that appealed to me was the image of the dry stack stone wall. I live about, we're recording this in Louisville, Kentucky. I live about an hour from here in the Bluegrass area. And you can't drive probably more than a mile without encountering one of these walls. They are everywhere. This one is about 100 yards from my house. And they're so interesting because they're called dry stack. They have no mortar. Most of them were originally constructed by farmers 150 to 200 years ago who were clearing their fields. And there's a lot of limestone. I can tell you that because I'm a gardener, and every time we dig in the ground, it's like, what are we going to do with all these rocks? Which is what they thought. And they said, well, let's just build fences out of them and to keep the livestock in. So they build these fences. The expert, and there are experts now who you can't, not just anybody can build one of these. You need to be an expert. They come in and they clear the area, they build the foundation, then they choose exactly the right stones that will fit together. They fit alongside each other with minimal trimming, and once the wall is laid like that, there is one final layer of stones across the top. Whereas most of the wall has been built so far by laying the stones horizontally, the top of the wall is a row of thinner stones that they can't use inside the wall, and they put them vertically, just for looks. The effect is absolutely beautiful. I see us as that top layer. We're the layer that everybody sees. You know, we are the people. And underneath are all these different things that support us, our tradition, the people we care about who still care about us, and of course, God's Word, God, Jesus Christ. And we'll talk about all those things as we go along. The second image that came to me is the cloud. Okay, that one didn't originate with me. It came from the writer of Hebrews, who talks about the cloud of witnesses. The stone wall is a metaphor for being supported. The cloud, a metaphor for being surrounded. Because community does both things for us, I think. In some ways, we really can't exist without community. People who are alone, completely alone, find existence to be very difficult. If we existed as that top row of the stone wall without the supports underneath, we'd be hanging in midair with our feet dangling, without the stones of our past and our present and future holding us up. And where would we be without the cloud of witnesses surrounding us, which is the theme of the study that we'll be talking about. Without Christ, who is the basis of our faith and the example for it, without hope amid the ties that bind. So, let's get right to lesson 1.